often learn powerful lessons from our parents. For example, my parents were always there for me. They never missed sporting events, concerts, or other activities. I always admired that. And I vowed to do the same for my kids, to be present. In October 2016, I found myself a divorced father of 2 young kids. I was a self-employed marketing professional, a business coach, and I hosted a top 10 business podcast show, which stemmed from a radio show I hosted called Boss Academy Radio. The show was exciting, and it really fueled my entrepreneurial passion. However, the more success, the more sacrifice I was making on the home front. In fact, from the time my kids were born, I was probably overly committed to my business endeavors. I was walking a dangerous path for a guy who was committed to being present. To be fair, my marriage was challenged long before we divorced. Before the launch of my first business, we both worked for a company that we absolutely loved. The owner was interested in exiting, so there was an opportunity for us to take over the business and run it while he worked on other projects. In the early days of discussion, this seemed like a dream opportunity. However, on vacation, while visiting family, we received a call that disrupted everything. He called us to tell us that he was selling the company and that we'd have to sign a contract with the new buyers. We were both devastated by this news. After a few days, however, I quickly got on board with the new management. She did not. So we went from business partners to being at odds. It didn't take long for me to see that the new company culture was not a fit. And it definitely wasn't helping my marriage. So I decided to take action. I negotiated on my contract, and I launched my first company. Here I was leaving a steady paycheck, benefits, stability, all for the opportunity to follow my dreams. What could go wrong? And did I mention that my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time? To say I was taking some risks was an understatement. I still remember the look on my son's face as I held him for the first time. They handed me this sweet baby boy who had the most pronounced cone-shaped head. And while I was taken back by this, the nurse assured me that eventually this would take back a normal shape. And to be honest with you, I didn't care. I loved this child no matter what. And I vowed I was going to be there for him. I was going to be present. 2 years later, I welcomed my baby girl into the world very much the same way. There I was, holding this beautiful girl, celebrating the fact that I was there. Man, I felt like I was nailing this whole parenting thing. I must have been. After all, I was present. I loved being a father. However, being a husband proved much more challenging for me. Previous business struggles, it really drove a wedge between us. And there was a lot of anger and resentment that was built up in that time. I look back on that, and it was a lot for people to go through, working together, having those failures. But ultimately, I knew that I was going to be okay because I had these children that I loved so much. While I look at my time as a parent, as an entrepreneur, I often feel like I didn't have my priorities in the right place. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of us face. I was focusing on the wrong things at the wrong times. Now, eventually, we decided that we could be better parents apart than together. I was terrified of this idea of raising a child of divorce, let alone 2. But I knew that I was going to be there. I was going to be committed to being there. I was going to be present as much as I could, just like my parents were. I always had a loving relationship with my mother. She was loving, nurturing, and I always felt so close to her. However, I didn't have that same closeness with my father. And it scared me because I didn't want my children to feel that way about me. My dad was different than my mother, and I think that's why there was maybe a little bit of a disconnection. Among those differences, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a teacher and a farmer, while my mom said, "I love you daily." My dad uttered that phrase one time to his 3 sons right after my mother's funeral. And my dad did his best. He showed love by being present. He didn't always share stories from his younger years, but when he did, we were often glued to every word. And my dad was like a lot of fathers. He told the same tale over and over. My brothers and I knew that my father loved us, but it just wasn't something he could express in words. However, my father was always there. He was always present. And that's how he showed love. One of my favorite stories my father would share was when he was in Korea. He was based in Newfoundland during the Korean War. General Curtis LeMay, who was known for this rough and tumble demeanor, was leading Strategic Air Command, and he'd showed up at the base. My father was working in an office pool. He had his head down, typing. He saw these eagles out of the corner of his eyes, and he pretended he didn't see them. LeMay walked over and ripped him up one side and down the other. Now, my father, ever defiant, always told the story that he had, with great pride, that he got in the last words during that confrontation. And I would always ask my father, "Hey, Dad, what were those last words?" "Yes, sir." 2019, my father passed away after a battle with dementia. That affliction had robbed him of his memories and his voice and his ability to communicate. And I barely went home. And when I did, it was really difficult. But a few days prior to his passing, I showed up with my nephew and my middle brother. We go to visit my dad. And I'm standing there in this room with this man who can't talk. He hasn't known who I am in 3 years. And I recalled that story, and I retold it to him. The punchline arrives. My father laughed, and I saw a familiar sparkle in his eye. Well, a fleeting moment left a huge impact. Once again, my father gave the gift of presence. It was a gift I thought he was done giving a long time ago. But there was something else this time, a true moment of connection. That was a defining moment for me because I no longer saw being present as enough. I saw that I wanted to build real connections. Yes, I still want to be present with my family. I still want to focus on their needs, but I want to be connected. I say that we stop focusing on just being present with our families and we focus on being engaged, being interested, and truly being committed. And most importantly, let's focus on building real connections.